Hi everybody, Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another repair video for you. It's back. The Subaru, my 1997 Subaru Legacy wagon. A viewer somewhere, I read an email, had asked me the question. They had stated that they had also had a hesitation, and for those of you not familiar with the backstory on the Subaru, I have had a hesitation with that I went through in the performance video series, link in the description, that I had concluded was something in the driveline. In particular, I felt it was something with the transmission, the all-wheel drive system that's supposed to send power to the front wheels and the back wheels. I suspected that was slipping based on the evidence that I found. However, it's come to my attention since then that there is the possibility that it's the axles themselves that are causing a problem. And some people mentioned aftermarket axles and things. And I was underneath the Subaru the other day doing an oil change, and I just played around with the axles a little bit, and I found a lot of play. So what I want to do today is I want to go up under this thing, and I want to replace those axles, just to have a video of replacing those axles. But in addition, I want to see if it really does have any positive or negative effects, or no effect at all, on this hesitation issue that I've been having. My first two steps are going to be, I'm going to raise the hood so I can get more light coming down into the engine compartment so that I can see a little better. I'm also going to raise the front of the vehicle on both sides because Subaru axles are somewhat unique, and then you need to knock out a roll pin, so you need to be able to turn the wheels around. Now, in addition to setting the parking brake, I'm also going to put the key into the ignition, but I'm not going to turn it on. I'm just going to put it in so that the steering wheel is unlocked. And what this will allow me to do is it will allow me to turn the wheel back and forth. Shush. Oh. Okay, I took the key back out so that you could hear me talk. But what this will allow me to do is, as I'm working, I'll be able to move the wheels back and forth so that I'm able to gain access to the things I need to gain access to a little better. Now that I've got the vehicle lifted up, I'm going to remove both front wheels. These are 19mm, by the way. Alright, now that we've got the wheels off, let's get a little bit better look at what I'm talking about. Alright, here's the left side axle. That's quite a bit of movement, in my opinion. And we'll come to the other side. I'm hoping you can see that this side has about an equal amount of play as the other side. There we go. Here's a good view. And I'm wondering, these look like the original equipment axles based on these stickers here. And also, the boots are a bit dry rotted. Really, this is kind of a shot in the dark. I think this might have an effect. And if nothing else, it hopefully will cure up how loose this is. It's my hope that it's not the differential that's this loose, that it's actually the axles that are worn to this degree. So let's remove these axles. To remove the axle, we're going to need to disconnect the lower ball joint from the lower control arm, and we are also going to need to remove the axle nut from the outside. And as you can see on that side, it's a bit rusty. So it's really just a question of that and a roll pin to get these out. But let's start with this cotter pin and this castellated nut that holds the ball joint in. Okay, I'm going to start by removing the cotter pin. Looks like this cotter pin is coming out in pieces. It's okay, we'll just replace it. It's looking like it might be one of those days. I'm going to hit it with a little bit of penetrating oil and see if I can knock out the remnants with a hammer. If not, I've just got to kind of run this off without it. I'm also going to put a little penetrating oil on this axle nut, mainly because this one didn't have a cap on this side, and I think it'll be easier to get off if I do this. I'm going to do the same to the other side. There we go. I got one piece out. That'll be helpful. Very happy, because I hate having to knock those out with a punch. This nut is 19mm. Now I'm going to remove the axle nut, which is a 32mm. Now some of you might have issue with me hitting on the axle directly, and you would be right. If you were doing some other thing like replacing a clutch or something like that, it'd be a great idea to take the axle nut and just thread it on here a couple of times and then hit on the axle nut. But since I'm replacing the axle, to me it really doesn't matter if I mushroom the end of the axle a little bit. Seems to be moving okay. So I'm gonna hit around the outside with a little bit of penetrating oil. When you're dealing with parts that are this rusty, penetrating oil is your friend. Now my preferred method of knocking the lower ball joint loose has always been to hit what it goes through. So in this case I'll be hitting the lower control arm to try to knock it loose. With these hollow control arms, that may not work as well because the force won't be transferred. I'm not a fan of using pickle forks because in my experience it tends to tear up boots and things like that. But there are other tools that you can use for this besides, you know, a blunt instrument. But it's my hope that this will be successful and I will be able to knock this guy loose. So swing away and enjoy. I noticed while hitting the noise changed, and by the way, I am wearing my safety glasses. And when the noise changes, that usually means that it's loose. And I was correct in that. Actually, I'll show you where I've got this hooked. All right, this is where I've got my pry bar positioned. I've got it hooked right up in there. This way I'll be able to move it down far enough so I can get this knuckle off of this lower control arm, which is what I'm going to need to do to remove the axle. There we go. Now I'm hoping my penetrating oil did the trick and I'm able to knock the axle back through the hub. In many ways the hard part's over. The axle's now loose. Man, is it loose. The axle's now loose and what I need to do is I need to remove the roll pin that's back inside on the inner joint. Okay, now we're looking in from the engine compartment. Right there you can see the axle, and right there you can see the roll pin that I'm going to need to remove in order to get the axle out. So you have a choice. You can either like go through all that exhaust and maybe you'll get lucky and find purchase there, or you, on this passenger side at least, you can come in from the top and see if you can get it out that way. There's my access from under the vehicle. As you can see, I've got a catalytic converter and a exhaust pipe that are kind of in the way, but I have a long set of punches and I've got to be real careful not to hit that O2 sensor, but I've got a long set of punches that I'm going to use to get in there to try to knock that through the top. And the reason I'm doing that is because I feel like I have a lot more room to drive that out from down here than I do from up top. So that's the reason why I've chosen to come from underneath. Alright, now as I said, I've got this long drift punch that I'm going to use to slip up between the exhaust here to try to knock that roll pin out. It's going to be difficult to bring you up in there with me, but once again I'm going to use a little bit of penetrating oil just to get things going. Try not to get this on that O2 sensor that's right underneath there. O2 sensors don't like external contamination. But I'm going to use that long punch, position it right on that roll pin, and then try to knock it through. Alright, here's that roll pin, up close and personal. Now that we've got that out, we can get our axle the rest of the way out and replace it. That should be just a matter of reaching in, pulling it off. There's a shaft there. And away you go. One axle shaft. And that's the stub that's sticking out of the differential there. And because it is, I just want to satisfy my own curiosity with it and see if it's got any real play in it. It's got some in and out play,
but no real up and down play. Well, maybe a little. So I'm hoping that my replacement of this works. Now, it looks to me like the outside of this here is set up in such a way to where it's got this locking mechanism. This may be how you can set preload on the axle bearings. So if they're loose, maybe you'll take this out and move this over, put a little more preload on this. And I'm not going to mess with the preload just because I don't know what the spec is, and this is about axle replacement. I just want to try replacing the axles to see what I get.
Personally, I've always considered it good policy to look over your new parts and compare them to your old parts to make sure everything's good. I'm grateful that my new axle comes with a new axle nut. Actually, this axle looks pretty good. And also, it looks like it's coming with a new roll pin as well. Right there, which I'm going to make sure that I use. I want to make sure that I have as good a roll pin as I can, because if there's any slop in this roll pin, it will equate to some of that slop we were seeing before. So everything looks to be the same. So I'm just going to exchange this one out and do the other side. If you look at this one's chamfered and this one is not. So I want the chamfered side on where I'm going to start my roll pin, and I also want to make sure that I line this hole up with the hole on the splines of the differential. So I need to make sure that I line those up. All right, I'm going to feed this through, and since I'm going to try to knock the roll pin back up from the bottom again, I'm going to keep the chamfered hole towards the bottom. I'm going to check to see if my hole's lined up. May be difficult for you to see, but I believe I've got that lined up. I need to just pull it away a little bit. And I'm going to try to knock the roll pin back up through the bottom in the same way I removed it initially. You may be able to see even better yet in this shot that I have a clean shot going through that hole to get the roll pin in. Now here's our roll pin, and you may notice like one side is tapered and one side is not. This is the side that's tapered, and this is the side that I want to start it, so that as it goes in there, it's able to get started, because it's actually, at this point, it's got some spring tension on it, and as you drive it in there, it's gonna push out. So you want to make sure that you start it on that tapered end, because if not, it won't want to go up in there as well. The hard part here is going to be getting it started. Once that hurdle's overcome, I think we'll be home free. So don't be afraid to do it from up top if you feel that that would work better. And actually, I think I've got a better idea. Okay, rather than try to fight this thing while it's up inside the car, I'm just going to see if I can get this started here outside. There. You can see that it's not down in touching the splines yet, but it's kind of ready to go once it's up in there. So it's going to be a lot easier to negotiate this roll pin. All I'm going to need to do is keep knocking it through rather than having to start it in a rather awkward position. Fish it back up through. Now it's even easier to see if I'm lined up with my splines. And also, the spline sticking out of the differential, there's also a chamfered hole there, so make sure you're driving into the chamfered hole. Well, still some slop, but I'm hoping it's better. Okay, now let's take care of the outside. Take the axle and put back through the hub. We're just gonna start the axle nut. Not get it in there all the way, just get it started. Insert my pry bar into the lower control arm as before. Very careful with that part. Got my castellated nut. Now make sure when you run this down, you've got clearance for your new cotter pin. Okay, so here's what I meant by that. You got to make sure that you're able to insert your cotter pin into there. We got a new one here. It's usually all I ever do with them. The final step will be to come in and just take a chisel and a hammer. Stake it in like that. They do that so that it doesn't work loose. I've never seen one work loose, but just in case, you have that feature. Now that we've done the one side, let's do the other. On this left side, we can see our roll pin a bit more clearly. It's just going to make life a little bit easier. To get it lined up so that it'll be easy for us to see. Remember, there's a chamfered side. So we want to make sure that we're starting from the chamfered side. Yeah, like I said, just like the other side, there's a little bit of play there. Okay, I forgot to mention that the axles on this vehicle are the same on both sides. So there is no left or right. And just as before, I have my roll pin already started. Oh, let's just get it started with the hammer. Yep. I don't think we hit it. There's a good sound. Just as I did with the other side, I'm just gonna use my punch backwards. That's bottomed out. Still some play. I would say it's not as much. And I don't know if that's going to be a question of tightening this differential up or not. But that will be for another video if that comes to pass. All right, well, let's get the wheels back on and take it for a test drive. All right, now that work is done, let's take it out for a drive and see if it made any difference at all. And it never acts up at the shop, as we know. There doesn't seem to be any lag. It seems tighter. Like I said, I don't know if that's just because I'm down at the shop. For whatever reason, this thing doesn't act up at the shop. But I'll drive it around for a bit and see if it makes any kind of difference. But so far, just initial impressions, there was virtually no hesitation when I took off out of that driveway. But we'll try it again up here at the next one. All right, here we go again. I'm just gonna mat it. It normally doesn't take off like that. I don't know if I can call this fixed or not, but it seems improved. Well, I would have trouble saying that it's fixed. I would say that it's better, but I wouldn't say that it's fixed. Perhaps it's still something involved in the transmission, as I suspected before. There's a clutch, it looks like, that sends power to the front wheels, and then there's also power that goes to the back wheels. I have a feeling there's some kind of... To me, it's always felt like there was a fight between the power going to the front and the rear wheels. Whenever I would take off, it was sort of a back and forth kind of power delivery. Or I don't know what the spec is as far as how much play there should be in that front differential. And it does look like I can tighten it up a little bit. But I don't want to do that until I check the service procedure and I find out exactly how much play is supposed to be there. That would be something that would be appropriate for another video, I think. At least now we know how to replace these axles. They're a little bit different in that they have those roll pins. The one on the passenger side is going to be the one that would be a little more difficult, basically due to access to that roll pin itself. I found that actually starting those roll pins in the axles before inserting them or installing them on top of those splines of the differential, I don't know, those axles, I hesitate to call them that, really did help rather than trying to fight it while it's up inside the car. Otherwise, it was a really straightforward axle replacement. You don't have to worry about any fluid coming out or anything because that's a sealed unit. The axles don't even go inside the differential, so none of that's a concern. It's just making sure you get your roll pins lined up, make sure you use the tapered ends and the chamfered ends, and that will give you the best advantage possible. We'll see. And if there's a significant difference, I'll report back. But until then, let's assume it made it better, but it didn't fix it. But it was fun to make the video, and it was fun to replace the axles. I don't feel bad about it whatsoever. Anyway, I am Eric the Car Guy. If you have automotive questions, you can find me over at EricTheCarGuy.com, where I would ask that you type in a couple of keywords to our search function to start with, and I'm sure you'll come up with something there. But if you don't, sign up for our forum. It's free. You can post your question over there. Also, you can find me Google+, Facebook, and Twitter, and I post videos here at Eric the Car Guy on Mondays and Fridays. And I will close with, be safe, have fun, and stay dirty. I hope you enjoyed this one. See you next time.